There is a quiet war inside all of us, not the kind that shouts, not the kind that explodes with drama, but a quieter, more dangerous kind. The war between who we are and who we know we could be. Between the part of us that says just 5 more minutes and the part that knows those 5 minutes could cost us a life we will never get back. Discipline. Everyone talks about it. Few live it. Fewer still understand what it really is. You might think discipline is just about waking up early, grinding through tasks, or denying yourself pleasure. But the truth is deeper. Discipline is not about restriction. It's about power. The kind of power that bends the future in your favor. The kind that turns intention into transformation. And no one understood that better than Niccolò Machiavelli. Often misunderstood as a cold manipulator, Machiavelli was not obsessed with cruelty. He was obsessed with control, with how humans work, how power moves, and how fragile empires, both political and personal, are when they lack inner governance. For him, discipline was not a virtue. It was a weapon, a shield, a necessary architecture for survival in a chaotic world. Centuries have passed since he wrote The Prince, but the struggle he described remains unchanged. A struggle that lives in modern chaos just as it did in the blood-stained politics of Renaissance Florence. Machiavelli watched as impulsive rulers fell to ruin while those who could govern their minds, who could delay gratification, master appearance, stay 3 steps ahead, rose to dominance. Today, our enemies do not wear armor. They are more subtle. Distraction, doubt, addiction to ease. A culture that whispers, "You're fine as you are," while stealing the hours you could use to become who you were meant to be. But here's the thing. Mastering discipline does not mean becoming emotionless. It means becoming sovereign over your inner world. It means learning the dance between desire and direction. It means, just as Machiavelli once warned, learning to govern yourself before someone or something else governs you. So, in this exploration, we will go deeper than surface habits. We will uncover the historical roots of discipline, how it evolved, why it matters, and what it means today. We will walk through the psychology of self-control, the hidden costs of neglecting it, and the ancient tools, both brutal and beautiful, that can help us reclaim it. Because when you master discipline, you do not just change your habits, you change your story. And 40 minutes is all it takes to begin. Let's start with a simple question. Why is discipline so difficult? Not because we lack knowledge. We live in the age of endless productivity hacks and motivational content. The problem isn't that we don't know what to do, it's that we can't seem to do it, consistently, deeply, without burning out or betraying ourselves in the process. To understand why, we need to step back, way back. Discipline is not a modern invention. It is an ancient survival strategy, a way human beings learned to contain chaos, tame desire, and build civilizations out of wilderness. In ancient Egypt, self-discipline was tied to the idea of ma'at, order, balance, truth. A disciplined person upheld the harmony of the world, not just through rituals or good behavior, but by aligning their internal world with cosmic law. To live without discipline was not just foolish. It was dangerous. It unbalanced the divine order. Fast forward to the Stoics of ancient Rome. Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, they all taught the same essential principle, that discipline is freedom. Not freedom from responsibility, but freedom from being ruled by every fleeting emotion or desire. If your moods control your actions, you are not free. You are enslaved by your impulses. For the Stoics, discipline was the art of living in accordance with reason, not cold rationalism, but an inner clarity that could survive the storms of life. In India, the Bhagavad Gita frames discipline as yoga, a union between effort and surrender. Arjuna, the warrior, is told that the path of mastery is through disciplined action without attachment to outcomes. This is a subtle but profound insight. Discipline is not just about control. It's about presence, doing what must be done, regardless of how you feel, because you are loyal to something higher than your comfort. The Quran describes a similar idea, that the soul, nafs, must be trained, restrained, guided through prayer, fasting, and reflection. Without discipline, the ego dominates. With discipline, the self becomes aligned with a divine purpose. This is not punishment. This is purification. In medieval Japan, the samurai practiced bushido, the way of the warrior. Honor, self-restraint, readiness. Their discipline was visible not just in combat, but in how they walked, ate, meditated. The smallest actions were shaped by philosophy, that to live well, one must govern the self before attempting to face the chaos of the world. Even in indigenous cultures, discipline was interwoven with nature. There were rituals of fasting, rites of passage, and seasonal labor. These practices weren't arbitrary. They taught patience, endurance, rhythm. They connected personal discipline to the cycles of the earth. You learned to wait. You learned to suffer with dignity. You learned to act with foresight. Now enter Machiavelli, standing at the edge of the Renaissance, a time of beauty, betrayal, and brutal politics. Florence was a swirling mess of power plays, fragile alliances, and shifting loyalties. He had watched up close as kings, popes, and dukes rose and fell. His conclusion was unsentimental. The world rewards those who are not just intelligent, but disciplined. Those who can maintain composure under pressure. Those who understand timing. Those who can play the long game. In The Prince, he writes that a ruler must learn not how the world should be, but how it really is. He must discipline his perception, remove illusion, anticipate betrayal, delay reaction. This was not cynicism. This was survival. But Machiavelli's genius was not just in understanding external politics. It was in showing how self-mastery and power are linked. A prince who cannot control his emotions becomes a puppet. A leader who seeks constant approval loses authority. A person who cannot endure discomfort becomes exploitable. These insights were radical then, and still are now. Today, discipline is often marketed like a lifestyle brand. Aesthetic morning routines, gym selfies, bulletproof coffee. But beneath the noise, the ancient truth remains. Discipline is not about forcing yourself. It is about forging yourself through repetition, through reflection, through resisting the easy path when it leads nowhere meaningful. So, what changed? In the modern world, we lost the sacred dimension of discipline. We stopped seeing it as a spiritual or philosophical practice. We replaced it with dopamine loops, convenience, and performance culture. We measure discipline by productivity, not by peace. We judge ourselves by how much we get done, not by who we are becoming. We also inherited a deeply flawed myth, that discipline is only for the harsh and heartless, that softness is weakness, that if you are kind to yourself, you will lose your edge. Machiavelli might disagree. He would say, "The disciplined are not cold, they are clear. They are not robotic, they are intentional. They know when to act and when to wait, when to hold the line and when to yield. Their strength is not in pretending to feel nothing, but in refusing to be ruled by feeling alone." Discipline, in this deeper sense, is not about self-denial. It is about self-respect. And if we follow its historical arc, from ancient wisdom to Renaissance strategy to modern psychology, we begin to see that the core challenge has always been the same. How do you remain true to your vision when everything around you, culture, fear, desire, is pulling you away from it? The Greeks called this akrasia, acting against your own better judgment. We know what is good for us, yet we don't do it. The reason is not lack of knowledge. It is lack of integration. Our desires are divided. Our attention is scattered. Our sense of time is warped. The ancients knew this. They built rituals, philosophies, even entire political systems around the idea that human beings must be trained, not dominated, but guided. discipline was not punishment, it was protection from chaos, both inner and outer. Today, that chaos is not external war, it is digital noise, psychological fragmentation, emotional burnout. But the solution remains strangely consistent with what Machiavelli and the ancients taught: a return to inner order, a conscious shaping of the self, a commitment to the long game, because empires fall, kingdoms rot, status fades. But discipline, real discipline, is a crown you forge for yourself. And once you wear it, no one can take it from you. So far, we have explored the ancient and historical roots of discipline. But what does modern psychology have to say? Quite a lot. One of the central discoveries in behavioral psychology is this: willpower is limited. Like a muscle, it can be fatigued. Decision fatigue, ego depletion, emotional overload. These aren't just buzzwords. They are scientifically observed truths about the human brain. And they help explain why even the most motivated people often fail to stay consistent. But here's the twist. Discipline is not just about having more willpower. It is about designing a life where you need less of it. This idea comes from the work of people like B.J. Fogg, who emphasizes behavior design, and James Clear, who popularized the phrase, "You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems." In other words, discipline is not just about trying harder. It's about thinking smarter, reducing friction, creating environments that support your intentions, building habits so automatic they require no daily decision at all. Still, psychology offers a more haunting insight as well. The enemy of discipline is not laziness. It is unresolved emotion. Think about it. Most of us are not unmotivated. We are overwhelmed, stuck in patterns of avoidance. We procrastinate not because we don't care, but because part of us is afraid of failure, afraid of success, afraid of being seen, or afraid of confirming the hidden belief that we are not good enough. This is where the psychological concept of cognitive dissonance comes in. When our actions don't match our values or self-image, the mind becomes uncomfortable. And instead of resolving this by changing behavior, many people change the narrative. I didn't really want that job anyway. I work better under pressure. I'm just not a disciplined person. But discipline isn't a personality trait. It is a relationship. With time, with discomfort, with the parts of ourselves we're usually too busy to meet. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He spoke of the shadow, the hidden, unconscious parts of ourselves that sabotage our conscious goals. The more you repress the shadow, the more it leaks through, in procrastination, addiction, distraction, self-sabotage. In this light, discipline is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. If you avoid your inner chaos, you will always be ruled by it. This is why modern therapy, especially cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, places so much emphasis on identifying limiting beliefs. If you believe discipline means self-hatred, you'll never sustain it. If you associate structure with punishment, you'll rebel against your own plans. True discipline must be rooted in compassion, not shame. And here's the paradox. Compassionate discipline is the most powerful kind, because it does not come from fear, but from clarity. Now let's turn to neuroscience. The brain is a prediction machine. It seeks patterns. It tries to conserve energy. It will always favor what is familiar over what is right. This is why breaking habits feels so painful. It literally goes against the brain's design. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational decision-making, is constantly battling the limbic system, where emotion and impulse live. But with repetition, discipline becomes habit. Habit becomes identity. And identity becomes destiny. Here, psychology meets ancient wisdom again. In Buddhist practice, mindfulness is not just a meditation technique. It is a way of noticing impulse without acting on it. observing the craving without feeding it. This builds what psychologists now call metacognition, the ability to think about your thinking, to pause, to choose, to act with intention instead of reaction. In Sufi traditions, the ego, or nafs, must be tamed through daily practice. This isn't about self-rejection. It's about refinement, about polishing the mirror of the self until it reflects something higher, something true. And this process requires what modern psychology would call delayed gratification. The famous marshmallow test, first conducted in the 1960s, tested children's ability to resist immediate reward for a larger reward later. Those who waited longer tended to have better life outcomes, more success, better health, even stronger relationships. But later studies found something even more interesting. It wasn't just self-control, it was trust. Children who believed the adult would return with the promised reward waited longer. So, what does that mean for us? That our discipline often fails not because we are weak, but because we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust that our future efforts will be rewarded. We don't trust that it's worth the wait. We don't trust that we're capable of change. And so we quit before we even begin. Machiavelli might have called this a failure of vision. If you cannot hold the future in your mind, you will always choose the comfort of now. His advice to rulers, though often brutal, rested on one idea. See clearly. Plan carefully. Act decisively. The same applies to personal discipline. Vision, clarity, strategy. These are not just tools of power. They are anchors for the self. One more layer here. In trauma psychology, there's a concept known as window of tolerance. It refers to the optimal emotional zone where a person can function effectively. Too much stress? You shut down. Too little? You disengage. Discipline that ignores this window becomes toxic. It leads to burnout, self-loathing, collapse. But discipline that honors your nervous system, one small step at a time, leads to resilience. This is why systems matter, why rituals matter, why forgiveness matters. Because discipline is not about never failing. It is about always returning. Like a martial artist returning to form. Like a monk returning to breath. Like a leader returning to vision after chaos. Every time you fall and get back up, you are teaching your brain, I can be trusted. And that trust is the real fuel of discipline. So, let's tie this together. Modern psychology teaches us that discipline is shaped by environment, belief, emotion, and memory. That it is more about consistency than intensity. That shame breaks it down, and self-respect builds it up. That impulse control is a skill, not a talent. That identity shapes behavior. And that healing our relationship with time, past wounds, future fears, present confusion, is at the core of becoming disciplined. And all of that echoes what philosophers, mystics, warriors, and thinkers have been saying for thousands of years. That to master discipline is to master desire. To master discipline is to become trustworthy in your own eyes. And to master discipline is to free yourself, not from effort, but from chaos. Because when you can walk past temptation and hold your vision, when you can delay pleasure without denying joy, when you can feel the impulse and choose not to follow it, you are no longer ruled by habit. You are ruled by purpose. Let's be honest. The cost of poor discipline is not just a messy schedule or an unfinished to-do list. It is something much deeper, something more personal. When we fail to live with discipline, we erode the trust we have in ourselves. And without that trust, everything else starts to wobble. Our identity, our confidence, our relationships, even our sense of purpose. Discipline is not just about what you do. It's about who you believe you are. When you break your word to yourself enough times, you begin to doubt your own sincerity. You start to feel like a stranger inside your own life. This is where the damage really begins. Because discipline is the scaffolding of self-respect. Without it, even the most brilliant person starts to drift. They know what they want, they dream big, but there's no bridge between their vision and their behavior. So the vision stays in the clouds, and their energy gets swallowed by regret. Regret is one of the most corrosive emotions. It grows in the spaces where action should have lived. It whispers, "You could have, you should have, why didn't you?" And the tragedy is, the pain of discipline is usually short, but the pain of regret? That one lingers. Modern psychology shows us how deeply this impacts our well-being. A person who lacks discipline tends to suffer higher levels of anxiety because they constantly feel behind. Their brain is stuck in what A.S. called the Zeigarnik effect. Unfinished tasks take up more mental space than completed ones. So even when they're resting, they're not really at peace. Their mind keeps circling back to what they avoided, what they abandoned, what they postponed. Over time, this creates chronic stress. And chronic stress changes everything. It affects your immune system, your sleep, your ability to regulate emotion, your ability to connect with others. People who live in constant avoidance mode often feel isolated, not because they're alone, but because they are hiding from their own potential, hiding from their truth. There's also an impact on relationships. Discipline is the root of reliability, and reliability is the foundation of trust. If you don't keep your word, to yourself, to others, people start to notice. Your words lose weight. Your presence loses solidity, and the people closest to you may feel like they're walking on shifting sand. Sometimes the damage is subtle. A friend stops depending on you. A partner stops confiding in you. A colleague starts leaving you out of key decisions. Not because they dislike you, but because they can't count on you. That's the social cost of undisciplined living. Invisibility. Not because people can't see you, but because you stop showing up in a way that matters. You become forgettable, replaceable, and in your quiet moments, that realization hurts more than failure ever could. Now, look at this through the lens of self-image. When we repeatedly fail to follow through, the subconscious forms a new identity. I'm unreliable. I'm weak. I'm someone who can't finish things. And once this belief is formed, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You stop trying, or you try with less effort, or you give up at the first sign of difficulty because deep down, you expect yourself to lose. This is what psychologists call learned helplessness, and it's a prison that looks like freedom. You tell yourself you're just taking a break, but really, you're hiding from your own disappointment. But here's the thing. This pattern is not permanent. It is not who you are. It is a symptom of wounds that never got air, of desires that were never structured, of values that were never anchored in daily life. And it has historical parallels. Consider the fall of Rome. Not the battles, not the invasions, but the slow rot from within. A once disciplined society grew soft, complacent, distracted. Citizens stopped participating in public life. Soldiers lost morale. Corruption became normal. Comfort became sacred. Machiavelli studied this closely. He saw that power, left undisciplined, always devours itself, not because of outside enemies, but because of internal decay. What happens to cities happens to souls. You lose your edge, then your integrity, then your identity. One compromise at a time. This is also echoed in ancient myths. Think of the story of Icarus, the boy who flew too close to the sun. He had wings, yes, but no discipline. He ignored the warnings, gave in to the thrill, and the result was not just a fall, but a death that could have been avoided. Discipline, in that story, is not a chain. It's the thread that keeps you airborne. Or take the tale of Narcissus, so captivated by his own reflection that he wastes away by the water's edge. The tragedy is not vanity, it's stagnation. He cannot move, cannot act, cannot break free. Without discipline, even the most beautiful vision becomes a trap. And in a more modern context, look at digital addiction, social media, entertainment, fast dopamine. We are drowning in content and starving for meaning. The average person now checks their phone over 200 times a day. That's not choice. That's compulsion. And compulsion is the opposite of discipline. It's a life run on autopilot. What does that do to the psyche? It fragments attention, lowers tolerance for boredom, weakens long-term thinking. And the worst part, it disconnects us from ourselves. You become a stranger to your own inner life, your own thoughts, your own goals, because the noise is always louder than the signal. So, what does all this mean? It means that neglecting discipline is not just a practical failure. It's an existential one. You lose time, you lose energy, but most of all, you lose direction. Without direction, every opportunity feels overwhelming. Every setback feels fatal. You start to live reactively instead of intentionally. And in that reactive state, you become easy to manipulate, easy to distract, easy to break. This is why discipline matters. Not because it makes you impressive, but because it makes you whole. It gives your life a center, a spine, a rhythm. So when the world pulls at you, through fear, temptation, chaos, you don't collapse, you don't scatter, you don't betray yourself, you return to your principles, to your path, to your power. And this is not about being perfect, it is about being rooted. Because when you are rooted in your values, you become unshakable. Not hard, not rigid, but strong, like bamboo in the wind. You can bend without breaking. You can act without overreacting. You can suffer without losing yourself. That is what Machiavelli understood, that behind every powerful state is a disciplined ruler. Behind every meaningful life is a disciplined self. That power without discipline is chaos, and discipline without vision is just control. But discipline with vision, that is transformation. Let's stop for a moment and breathe. Because by now, you've probably seen yourself somewhere in this story. In the unfinished projects, the late-night self-doubt, the constant tug-of-war between who you are and who you want to be. But here is the good news. Discipline can be learned. Not through punishment, not through sheer grit, but through structure, compassion, and small daily victories. Let's begin with something simple and ancient. 1. Start with rituals, not goals. In Stoic philosophy, the wise man is not one who chases fortune or avoids failure. He is the one who governs himself. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, began each day by reminding himself that the world would test him, that pain, betrayal, fatigue, they were not exceptions. They were the path. So instead of chasing massive goals, begin with daily rituals. Wake up and make your bed, not because it's impressive, but because it's yours. Drink water before coffee. Sit in stillness before the chaos begins. Light a candle before writing. Say a phrase before work. These are signals to the brain. This is who I am now. Discipline does not begin with big moves. It begins with identity. Rituals anchor that identity in time. 2. Design your environment to reduce friction. Willpower is overrated. What matters more is environment. If your phone is the first thing you see in the morning, that's not a discipline issue. It's a design issue. If your workspace is cluttered and your fridge is full of junk, you are making the hard choice the default one. Behavioral scientist B.J. Fogg teaches that small changes in environment lead to big changes in behavior. So, prep your space for the life you want. Want to read more? Put a book on your pillow. Want to eat better? Cut fruit in the morning so you don't reach for sugar at 3 p.m. Want to work deeply? Use website blockers. Create time blocks. Make focus easy. This is not laziness, it's strategy. And Machiavelli would approve. He believed that power was not maintained by force alone, but by foresight. Smart rulers reduce chaos before it starts. Smart individuals do the same. 3. Build keystone habits. Not all habits are equal. Some habits, when formed, create a ripple effect. These are called keystone habits. For example, regular exercise often improves sleep, mood, productivity, and even diet. Why? Because it reinforces an identity. I take care of myself. Another keystone habit is journaling, and not in a performative, aesthetic way, but in a raw, honest, reflective way. Take 5 minutes to ask yourself, where did I stay true to myself today? Where did I betray my vision? What am I avoiding, and why? This is not about judgment, it's about intimacy with your own mind. The Sufi poet Rumi said, "The wound is where the light enters you. Journaling reveals the wound, and in doing so, it makes healing and discipline possible." 4. Practice emotional regulation. Most of the time, we don't lose discipline because we're tired. We lose it because we are triggered. Someone criticizes you, and you reach for distraction. You feel anxious, and you abandon the task. You get overwhelmed, and you tell yourself it's pointless. So the real question is not, how can I work harder? It's, how can I soothe my nervous system when the world gets loud? This is where breathwork, mindfulness, and even cold exposure come in. These practices train the nervous system to remain calm in chaos. A Stoic would call this ataraxia, a state of inner stillness untouched by fortune. A modern therapist might call it resilience. You do not need to meditate for an hour. Start with 2 minutes. Notice your breath when you want to quit. Feel your feet when you want to scream. Anchor yourself, and you will act from clarity, not reaction. 5. Rewire your narrative. Remember this: behavior follows belief. If you see yourself as a lazy, inconsistent person, your brain will try to stay congruent with that identity. It will sabotage you the moment you try to shift. So begin the rewiring process. Every time you follow through, even on something small, say to yourself, "This is who I am." You do not need to fake confidence. You need to reinforce reality. I kept my word. I wrote for 10 minutes. I made the call. I turned off my screen. I returned. These are not small things. These are seismic shifts, because each one rewrites a story of who you are, and over time, discipline becomes less about effort and more about alignment. 6. Embrace boredom. One of the most underrated tools for discipline is boredom. Modern life teaches us that every moment should be entertaining, stimulating, new. But the truth is, mastery is monotonous. Growth is repetitive. Great work is often dull. The Stoics embraced this. So did Machiavelli. When he was exiled from political life, he spent his days tending to his farm, walking alone, and then, at night, dressing in formal robes to write letters to the ancients. He practiced discipline even in solitude, even in obscurity. That is the test. Can you be devoted even when no one's watching? Can you hold the line even when it's boring? If you can, you are no longer ruled by feeling. You are ruled by purpose. 7. Practice compassionate accountability. Discipline without compassion is cruelty. You're going to fail. You're going to forget. You're going to fall back into old patterns. That doesn't mean you're broken. It means you are human. The goal is not to never fall, it's to fall forward. So when you miss a day, do not spiral. Reflect. Adjust. Return. Use tools like habit tracking apps, accountability partners, or simple calendar marks. But use them as mirrors, not whips. There is no shame in struggle. There is only shame in giving up on yourself entirely. And even that can be forgiven, because discipline is not a one-time choice. It is a lifelong conversation. 8. Link discipline to meaning. This is the final piece. Discipline that is not connected to a deeper purpose will always collapse under pressure. It will become performative, fragile, hollow. But when discipline is rooted in meaning, it becomes sacred. Ask yourself, what kind of life am I building? Who do I serve by becoming more focused? What would it mean for me to truly show up? For my work, my family, my potential? These are not productivity questions. These are soul questions. And when you link your habits to your soul, you no longer need to chase motivation. You become devotion itself. There's something about the name Machiavelli that evokes images of manipulation, power games, and dark strategy. But behind the modern misinterpretation lies a more intimate truth. Machiavelli wasn't teaching the art of cruelty. He was revealing a timeless paradox. To truly lead others, you must first rule yourself. It's easy to forget that The Prince was not written for tyrants. It was written for a man who was losing everything: status, career, homeland, reputation. It was written by a man in exile, stripped of the very power he once studied. So why did he write about princes? Because the prince was never just a man on a throne. It was an archetype, a symbol of inner sovereignty, of vision in chaos, of the disciplined individual who, even in exile, remembers who they are. And that's where we bring this home, because you, too, are your own kingdom. Every day, your mind is a battlefield. Your energy is under siege. Your attention is a prize fought over by corporations, screens, cravings, and fears. You live in a world where distraction is profitable and self-mastery is rare. So the question becomes, will you rule yourself? Will you become your own prince? Not in the Machiavellian caricature, but in the deeper sense, the one that reclaims the throne of the self from the forces that scatter it. Because discipline is not about restriction. It is about remembering the throne exists in the first place. It's not about controlling every emotion. It's about knowing which voice is worthy of command. The psychology of the inner court. In Jungian psychology, there's the concept of the inner cast, the idea that our psyche is populated by different characters: inner critics, wounded children, wise elders, saboteurs, heroes. The undisciplined mind allows the loudest voice to run the show. The disciplined mind listens to them all, but lets the sovereign decide. And here's what makes this so powerful. Discipline is not suppression. Discipline is dialogue, governance, conscious choice. When you want to abandon your goals at the first sign of boredom, that's the rebel in you speaking. When you want to sabotage a relationship to avoid vulnerability, that's the wounded child. When you push too hard and burn out, that's the inner tyrant. But the sovereign listens and then says, I see you, I hear you, but I decide. That is the beginning of true power. Discipline as an act of love. We often talk about discipline as willpower, but at its highest form, discipline is love. Love for your future self. Love for the life you are building. Love for your mind, your body, your time on earth. Think of the most disciplined people you admire. Whether it's the monk who wakes at dawn, the mother who shows up without fail, the artist who keeps creating even when the world looks away. Their discipline isn't punishment. It is devotion. And that is the shift we must make. To stop seeing discipline as self-harm, and start seeing it as self-honoring. The two voices, chaos and order. Every day, you face a choice between two voices. One says, this doesn't matter, skip it, delay it, numb out. The other says, you are building something sacred. Show up, even if it's messy. The first voice is familiar, comfortable. It often sounds like relief, but it is a thief. It steals your potential inch by inch, wrapped in velvet excuses. The second voice is quieter, firmer. It carries weight, and every time you listen to it, even briefly, you strengthen it. Discipline is not about never hearing the first voice. It's about choosing the second more often than not. A new way to measure progress. In a culture obsessed with results, discipline is often measured by outcomes. How much money you made, how many tasks you completed, how your body looks, how others perceive you. But that's shallow. It's hollow. Because discipline is most meaningful when no one sees it. It is the daily act of choosing self-respect over self-sabotage, of doing the thing even when it doesn't yield fireworks, of staying close to your values even when your feelings scream otherwise. So here's a new question. Did I keep a promise to myself today? That's it. That's the measure. And if the answer is yes, even once, then you are already succeeding. The myth of the overnight switch. One of the biggest myths is that one day you will wake up and be completely disciplined. That one moment of inspiration, or one life-changing book, or one perfect routine will flip the switch forever. But the truth is quieter than that. There is no finish line. You will have good days and days where you forget everything you've learned. That's okay. That's not failure. That's rhythm. The point is not to never fall off. The point is to return more quickly each time. And over time you build something stronger than routine. You build resilience, you build identity, you build home inside yourself. Reclaiming the throne. Let's return to Machiavelli. When he wrote The Prince, he wasn't glorifying cruelty. He was reminding the reader that leadership, internal or external, requires clear eyes and steady hands, that sentimentality can cost lives, that vision without action is fantasy. But most importantly, he was speaking to those in exile, people who had fallen from grace, lost their power, or forgotten who they were, people like you, like me, because exile doesn't always come with chains. Sometimes it comes in the form of burnout, distraction, trauma, or disillusionment. We become strangers to our own potential, rulers who have abandoned the throne. Discipline is the return, not just to structure but to sovereignty, to walk back into the court of your inner kingdom, to call your mind to order, to remember that your time, your energy, your presence are not cheap. They are royal currency, and from this place discipline is no longer something you do. It is who you are. So, what does it really mean to master discipline? It's not about becoming a machine. It's not about waking up at 5 a.m. every day or sticking to a color-coded calendar or beating yourself into submission. To master discipline is to master relationship, with time, with choice, with your future self. And if we've learned anything from Machiavelli, from the thinkers, mystics, and psychologists who came after, it's that discipline is not the opposite of freedom. It is the path to it. Because without discipline, you are ruled by emotion, by impulse, by the moment. But with it, you become the architect of your life. Look at history. Every person who changed the world, every artist, every warrior, every philosopher, had moments of doubt, failure, temptation. The difference was that they returned. They recommitted. They remembered why they began. When Machiavelli was thrown from power, imprisoned, and exiled, he could have vanished into silence. He didn't. Instead, he began his most important work. He turned suffering into scholarship. He disciplined his pain into purpose. That's what discipline gives you. Not perfection, but a center, a gravity, a home inside yourself that the world cannot shake. And it is not built all at once. It is built in the 1,000 quiet moments where you say yes to what matters most, and no to what seduces you away from it. And if you're listening to this right now, you're already on that path. You already want more, and that desire alone is sacred. Let's take a breath together. Let's release the myth that we have to do it all perfectly. Let's release the shame that says if we haven't figured it out by now, we never will. Because here's the truth. The fact that you are still trying is proof that you have not given up. You are still in the arena. You are still writing the story. And if you look closely, you'll see something powerful. You are not starting from zero. You already have discipline. You just haven't always called it that. It's in the way you show up for people you love, even when you're exhausted. It's in the way you keep learning, even when no one's clapping. It's in the way you resist what numbs you, even if only for a moment. Discipline is already alive in you. We're just learning how to feed it, how to shape it, how to trust it. And the more you practice, the more natural it feels. At first, discipline feels like effort. Later, it feels like alignment. Because the more you live in accordance with your values, the less inner conflict you carry, the less shame, the less regret, the more energy you have for what matters. And one day, almost quietly, discipline transforms into something else. Integrity. You do the hard things not because you have to, but because you cannot imagine betraying yourself anymore. That's what this is about. Not becoming superhuman, but becoming deeply, fiercely, authentically you. So where do you begin? You begin with one promise, one ritual, one step, and then you take another, and another, until the voice inside you changes, until the excuses lose their grip, until the habits become a home. And the beautiful part? It doesn't take years. It takes attention. It takes presence. It takes remembering who you're becoming. Discipline is not a wall you build overnight. It is a path you carve with every choice, a path that, one day, becomes the road home. If you've made it this far, then something inside you is awake. Maybe it's a quiet ache. Maybe it's a fire. Maybe it's just the soft, stubborn voice that says, I want to live differently. This space, this channel, exists for that voice. Not the one that chases shallow perfection, but the one that longs for depth. Discipline. Power with integrity. Freedom with structure. A life where who you are on the inside finally aligns with what the world sees on the outside. We don't do surface-level advice here. We explore the roots of psychology, history, myth, and self. Because change isn't just about doing more. It's about remembering who you are beneath the noise. It's about reclaiming the power you've handed over to fear, distraction, and doubt. Together, we uncover ancient wisdom and modern science. We reflect, we grow, we return again and again to the person we're becoming. So if this resonated with you, if something in your chest softened, sparked, or stirred, I invite you to subscribe. Not because I want a number, but because I believe in creating spaces where self-awareness is sacred, where curiosity is strength, where emotional intelligence is power, where people like you, quietly strong, deeply feeling, endlessly learning, can come to breathe, to rebuild, to rise. We're not here to become machines. We're here to become whole. And if you're ready to keep walking that path, through history, through the psyche, through the soul, then I'm honored to walk it with you. Subscribe. Join us. Not just for more content, but for more you. Because this isn't just a video. It's a beginning. Let's keep going. Let's keep becoming. Together.